On Monday, August 14th, Albuquerque attorney Pat Rogers filed an emergency motion to the New Mexico Supreme Court, asking they act to remove a proposed sick leave ordinance from the October 3rd ballot. Opponents of the Healthy Workforce Ordinance, which is known, that's its name, which would require employers to let their workers accrue paid sick leave, called the measure extreme and, quote, a job killer, end quote. Those who support the ordinance say workers will no longer have to choose between taking care of a sick child or a paycheck, and it would encourage wage earners to stay home when they are sick and not spread their germs. Here to look at different sides of this issue are this week's Line Opinion panelists. I'm joined now by Rachel Sam. She's editor of Albuquerque Business First. Daniel Foley, former House Minority Whip. Former State Senator Eric Griego is with us. And Vicki Harrison from Common Cause, New Mexico. Rachel, starting with you. Start us off here. All we have right now I'm going to start with the business community specifically, is anecdotal thoughts about what might happen with this. I'm curious, you might be a funnel point there at your paper from hearing. What are you hearing now from business owners? Because it's now starting to rise. It's sort of simmered all summer.
Yeah.
Now it's getting real and businesses are getting in the game. What's your sense of it?
People are definitely paying attention. You're seeing a lot of the larger business trade groups, associations here in town lining up against the ordinance.
Officially lining up against it.
Yeah. You've got the Association of Commerce and Industry, the Realtors Association, some of those folks really speaking out strongly against it, pushing some of the legislation or the lawsuit against it.
The Restaurant Association here as well. Yeah.
And then on the side of businesses speaking out for it, you're seeing more of that from independent businesses, Nexus Brewery, Donut Mart, some of those kinds of companies here in town.
Is there a common thread you're gleaning from those who are opposed? Is there one specific part of it that gets them?
Well, there's a couple of things.
Okay.
Cost is a big one, but there's just that sense among business people, they don't like being told what to do. Sure. Especially in this economy, we hear a lot from business people, hey, we're out there creating jobs. Right. Don't put these additional mandates on us that make it harder. Right,
that makes sense. Eric, on the other side of the issue, of course, for the worker, this, again, I say bubbling under, this other part's been bubbling for a couple of years now. The idea that, you can have some sick leave and not have to play games with your employer seems fairly simple on the surface, but it is complicated, isn't it? Talk about this from the workers' side of things, though.
Well, just in full disclosure, I'm working, I'm a strong supporter of it and working with the coalition very closely. I'm a little disappointed, frankly, that in some of the messaging coming out from some of the bigger business groups that this is some sort of draconian thing. We're talking about an hour per 30 hours, right. And no more than 40 hours a year for small businesses, no more than 56 hours a year. So we're basically saying
bigger businesses, 56,
for the bigger businesses,
right.
Over 40 employees. So essentially what we're saying is, do you think that any business, small or large, should give employees 1 hour off, to basically per 30 hours to take care of an elderly parent who maybe need care, a sick kid at school. It includes sexual assault, domestic violence. So it's kind of the same old sort of story in these tired talking points that we heard when I co-sponsored the smoking ban in Albuquerque, that it was going to lead to mass exodus and the economy, as we know, it was going to be destroyed. The same thing we heard on the minimum wage, none of which ever came to fruition. Now, so it's this old talking point that if we do anything to improve the lives of working people, not people who work shifts, people who work in the service industry, those who are really in the toughest sort of employment situations, who, unlike most of us, can't take an hour off to take care of a kid. Frankly, most of the folks involved in these trade associations aren't in the situations that the workers are in, who if they take an hour off and they're a shift worker, it's really going to affect their employment. So I would hope as a community that we would say, this is not draconian. This is basic. This is a basic thing. Do we value our employees? Do we value our health in this community? And most importantly, do we value our kids and elders, who are the primary beneficiaries of having an employee say, well, yeah, I can pick him up because he's sick and I don't have to lose my job, or I can take care of my elder parent.
Right.
So
I hear that. And Daniel, on the other side of the issue, well, actually on both sides, a state district judge rejected this idea last Friday, and now it's going on to the Supreme Court. Do you anticipate any relief from the Supremes, other than, you think it's going to be the same kind of decision?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Gene, as we've said this before, you know this. I mean, it's the most partisan activist Supreme Court I've ever seen is the New Mexico State Supreme Court. So I find it hard to believe that you're going to have this progressive issue being out there and look, conservative organizations fighting it, and the Supreme Court's going to step in and say, okay, we're listening to all sides of the issue. I just think at the end of the day, I appreciate what Eric had to say, and I think that it sounds great when you wrap it all up in these little sound bites. First of all, you got the Federal Family Emergency Leave Act that applies to a lot of these business folks. It doesn't apply to some of the smaller ones. I don't think people are opposed to saying, hey, let's give someone, an hour off. I don't know any business that doesn't do that doesn't say, hey, listen, if you got a sick relative, sick family member, sick somebody, what they do say is we're going to give you the time off, but we got to replace somebody else to work that shift for you because these businesses have to go on, especially these types of businesses. But I think the part that my good friend Eric is kind of glazing over is this whole, you file a complaint and the employer has to pay for your lawyer, and we got this whole hearing process and all of the stuff that goes through. I mean, at the end of the day, nobody's opposed to helping workers. Nobody's opposed to making sure that workers have a great opportunity in an environment to flourish. I don't think any business would succeed with angry workers, especially the service industries. I mean, you can't go, we've all been victims where we've gone to a restaurant or a bar before and we've had a very angry worker that works for us. It's not a very good deal. Right. So I think a lot of these entities already do this. I think at the end of the day, this is another one of those kind of under the radar. We're going to say these nice couple, 3 or 4 things, but it's really an opportunity to change policy when it comes to looking at saying, look, we're going to make sure that lawyers are getting paid. We're going to make sure that we can tie businesses up in lawsuits. We're going to try to force policy down people's throats. But at the end of the day, when Eric says things like, we had these other examples where the sky was falling, and I don't know anybody saying that the smoking ordinance was going to drive people out of town. I think people talked about it being a choice, and I think it was not right for the government to make a decision. But when he says the minimum wage thing hasn't affected anything, well, that's not what the studies say. I mean, we look at Santa Fe, we look what's happened in the city of Santa Fe from the University of Kentucky in their study. There have been a lot of problems with the changes that have come across.
I just want to make sure you reference it. So on the smoking ban, that was the central talking point that the same folks involved, the Restaurant Association. I was there, I was the co-sponsor. I remember very specifically this was going to kill the Albuquerque economy, because everybody was going to go to the pueblos and everybody was going to go to the county. Didn't happen. Right. On the minimum wage, actually, the overwhelming majority of studies nationally, we're not the only city to do this, have said that it has zero effect. There's probably one study that I think is out of, it's kind of like climate change, 1 out of 100 maybe, that says that there's an effect on employment. In fact, it's actually shown that it increases demand. If you believe in demand-side driven economics, which many of us do, that people having the ability to buy things. In the case of sick leave, if employers really want to make things better for workers, we're talking 1 hour. We're talking 1 hour sick leave per 30 hours of work. That's not draconian at all. And just that last point, I just want to say.
Well, take out all the lawyer stuff.
The lawyer point. Well, this is not being pushed by lawyers, by the way. This is being pushed by groups representing workers. And actually, that process, all it says is if you fire somebody who just took some of that sick leave, they have a right to sort of question it, because that has been traditionally, sadly.
I want to come back to that 90-day rule, because that's an interesting thing there. Vic, the so-called home rule is the second part of the suit going to the Supreme Court, meaning, if Albuquerque being on its own municipality can do these kind of things, but the opponents say, no, in fact, you can't as a municipality. What's your sense on that one, the home rule thing? Is that going to find some traction?
That is the most disturbing part of the argument for me, is the idea that the people never have a voice.
Gotcha.
And for someone to come out and say that, this is unconstitutional to do ballot measures in the cities, that's ridiculous. We've been doing it for years. Why would we suddenly not be able to do that? And if you really thought that, why haven't you done something before now? Why does it have to come right up? I mean, this has been talked about for the last 2 or 3 years in Albuquerque. I mean, these groups tried to put it through the council, then they went out and collected signatures. I mean, that's the core of democracy. And whether you like it or not, it's messy. But if the people never get a chance to have their voices heard except to vote for someone to represent them, that's the beginning of the end of this experiment in America.
Right.
It really is, because we have to. We don't have it statewide, and which is good and bad in certain instances, just because of all the money that flows into statewide ballot measures. But to say that the citizens who followed the Albuquerque City Charter to a T can't have a question on the ballot is just ridiculous.
That's probably more interesting to me that bit than what's going on with this other bit. Now, Rachel, the other bit which is interesting is the idea, Eric mentioned the 90-day little window there, but the other part is that this also applies not just to full-time and part-time folks, but temp workers as well. And some of the employers I've talked to have a real issue with that,
Mm-hmm.
that somehow this extends to temp workers, that somehow, in life you want people to earn their way into the company, so to speak, and then you get the good stuff like sick leave and stuff like that. Are you hearing things about that as well, the temp side of things as being a potential sticking point for them?
That is one of the issues that we hear about, beyond just the general philosophical aspects of the debate. The lawyer issue and that issue are a couple of things that we hear about quite a
And
bit.
the 90-day thing, I get to Eric on this in a second, but the idea that an employee could come back around and say, well, in the 90 days after I took this sick leave, something happened.
Right.
And my worry is it potentially a problem where an employee wanting to jack up the former employer could say, I got fired for this other thing, but really it was about this sick thing. And then everyone's got to fight it out in court. Have you been hearing?
That's certainly what a lot of employers that are saying they're anxious about it are worried about. Now, the supporters of the ordinance, say there are safeguards in there that make that very unlikely. Certainly, it's something that's kind of keeping employers up at night.
And it costs money, Eric, to do these things. If you have to defend yourself in court against a charge like this, is that fair to the employer that may have a problem with this employee 90 days down the road?
Not if they're acting, responsibly. I mean, again, I want to.
But who would determine that, the responsible behavior or not? It would be the courts, or who gets the...
Well, if you fire somebody who took this benefit, which again, we're not talking about a 401k here in terms of the temporary employees or unpaid. The whole point of this is federal law doesn't cover a lot of these folks. And the way, sadly, that many employers get around those requirements on size and on full-time status is they hire folks as temps. There's been this boom in temp agencies. So the way you get around a lot of these laws, sadly, and I wish it was an exception, but it's actually standard practice among many companies, including in Albuquerque, is you use these much more tenuous employment situations without benefits, without retirement, without something as basic as sick leave. I want to get back to that. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about a 401k or paid leave to go do even PTA stuff. We're talking about if you need sick leave. So all it says, and I hope people will read the ordinance. Sadly, these same groups had fought against actually having the ordinance printed in a legible font or a summary so people could read it. But please go and read the ordinance. What that section says is if you fire somebody and it's proven that you did that because they took sick leave, then yeah, you have a responsibility and you have liability there. If you didn't, and it's an erroneous, just like any other frivolous law. Sure. We have these in workers' comp. We have them. There's a process, but we need an independent arbiter of whether or not that happens. And I just think it's a red herring. This whole issue.
Why don't you ask them who pays for the lawyer for the employee when they file the claim? The business does. See, these are problems with all of this stuff. And at the end of the day, when we talk about this being a groundswell of grassroots organizations, and when you look at organizations like ACORN that have a long history of being involved in partisan political politics, have a long history of being involved with falsely registering people across the country as well as in New Mexico, throwing away voter registration forms that are one party or another. It's interesting that when you hear Eric say, well, this is a groundswell of support for the workers, this is really a political move, which is fine. It's a political move by an organization with an agenda, and I think the people should just know that, and the people get to make a decision.
ACORN is... They're not part of the landscape anymore, are they?
Oh, they are.
Something
Yeah, it's Olay, ACORN. Those are all.
Okay.
Those guys
They're
all
different.
work together. Well, I mean, change your name, same organization, doing the same thing. They're all part of the same group and fabric of people. And so, at the end of the day, this is really. I mean, it's not about sick leave 1 hour.
Right.
It's about how do you get an agenda through where you just beat down the businesses, force them to pay for people. Eric's right. All you got to do is file a complaint, and according to this ordinance, you file the complaint, then the business has to defend itself, and the business could have to pay to defend you as well.
That's a good point there. Vicki, let me finish with you on this again. The idea of the people having a say in this, it seems very simple on its surface. You touched on it a minute ago. Are there not certain things that perhaps should be better left to another device besides, the people weighing in on how a business does its business, so to speak? Is that...
Oh, absolutely. There's plenty of other ways, and I think businesses and the government and city council have had many years to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. And if you don't like this, then change the city charter, which is what we've heard the rumors from people who don't like this, is that we should expect from them coming up a ballot measure to get rid of ballot measures.
Right.
I'm going to have fun with that one if they do that.
I know you will.
But I mean, and just, I just want to push back a little bit on Dan because...
Surprise.
I know. Back in 1985 in Memphis, Tennessee, I was a proud canvasser for ACORN. ACORN did a lot of good around this country. There were some people that tried to get them involved in things, and just like anything, whether it's legislators or community organizations, you're going to have some bad apples, but they did a lot of good. I know I personally worked on cleaning up toxic dumps in neighborhoods and getting rape laws passed. So
Well, we know
just
that
have
they
to
we
put
know
out
that
a
we know that
fight.
they literally threw away hundreds of Republican ballots. We know that they literally went out and tried to stifle conservative voters going to the ballot.
Regrettably, we have to leave
And again,
Acorn. We have to leave the history
bad
of
on both
Acorn on
sides,
the
but they
table.
did a lot of good.
That's all right. Now, we'll be back in a moment here at the Line Table to talk about possible concerns over accreditation at the University of New Mexico.